I believe every human interaction, no matter how brief, has the potential to change your life. And if I truly believe that to my core, why would I not go and meet 10,000 different people and try to create more intentional interactions with people?
Welcome to today's version of the Keynote Curators podcast. My name is Seth Dechtman, your Keynote Curator. Today's guest is Rob Lawless. Rob is a storyteller, and he's a man on a mission to meet with 10,000 people one-on-one for an hour each. Rob shares in his keynote speeches his journey of how he learned to create a network and a community that is supportive and can help everybody reach their goals. It's a fascinating conversation. We appreciate you joining us. Listen in, you'll be smarter for it. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's version of the Keynote Curators podcast. I'm Seth Dechtman, your Keynote Curator.
Okay.
Today's guest is Rob Lawless, as in no laws, as in anything goes, which is kind of like our current banking system, anything goes. But enough social commentary and economic commentary. Welcome to today's podcast, Rob.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And I think it's like 4 years in the making, going back to our introduction through Laura.
Yes. So my cousin Laura met Rob and emailed me and said, hey, I met this great guy and he's beginning to get into speaking or doing more speaking or looking to expand his speaking. And I think, I'd like to have you talk to him, and anything for my cousin Laura. So of course, we got on the phone in the plain as day pandemic as it could get. And we had a long Zoom call about all things keynote speaking. And here we are full circle a couple of years later. And now we're doing a podcast together. Rob, why don't we start right there? Why don't you share with everybody, I'm going to cue you up with the word 10,000.
Sure.
So dial us into where you're at, what the word 10,000 means to you, and how it's relevant to your keynote speaking. We only have 3 or 4 days for the answer, so try to keep it short.
Okay. Yeah. So I am currently on a mission to spend an hour one-on-one with 10,000 different people to both learn about their lives and see what comes of opening doors for no particular reason. I started the project in November of 2015, and to date, I have met over 5,500 people. So I think it's somewhere around 15 now, but every single one of those people, I've spent an hour with them one-on-one, and I've distilled their life story into a post that I've shared to Instagram. So been keeping track of every single person. I've taken a picture with them, met the first 3,259 people in person. And that was in Philadelphia, it was in Los Angeles, it was in Hoboken, New Jersey, New York City. And then the pandemic happened and I went virtual, and I've since met over 2,000 more people from 90 different countries around the world. So my day today looks like meeting 3 new people every single day and then working on building a speaking business.
That is so cool. So where was my cousin Laura? Was she like early days, like in the first 1,000, or where did she fall?
She and I met in September of 2019, and she was probably like 2,000, 3,000, because March of 2020 was when I started going virtual. So I was about 3,300 at that time. So maybe around like 2,500. But yeah, I had a friend who was kind enough to host me in Hoboken for 9 months, and she and I met in that time, which I'm very thankful for.
That's so cool. What a small world getting smaller, right?
Yeah.
So Rob, these 5,515 people, both virtual and in person, and the posts and everything, there's a lot there. There's a lot to unpack. But I want to glom onto one thing you said for no particular reason. I'm not so sure that that's really the case. Something inspired you. Something was the impulse. Something was the spark, the seed, the initial thought.
Yeah.
Share us, because I say you say flippantly for no particular reason. I think that there was something there. Could you reveal that for us?
Yeah, for sure. I think in recent years, I've been able to put my why, so to speak, into words. And the why is I believe every human interaction, no matter how brief, has the potential to change your life. And if I truly believe that to my core, why would I not go and meet 10,000 different people and try to create more intentional interactions with people? So yeah, there's the wanting to achieve kind of the organic connection that I had when I was a student in college, but I saw how much fulfillment that gave me and wanted to be more intentional about it. So just the belief that every human interaction has the potential to change your life, and wanted to see what that looks like when you do it 10,000 different times.
And did you believe that just based on pure conjecture, or did you have that experience and then you wanted to see what would happen if you took it kind of to the nth degree?
I think it was based on experience too. I've always been a people person throughout my life. I'm naturally extroverted, and I went to Penn State University, so a school where there's 40,000 students. And part of the driving force for me to go there was I knew that I'd get to know people and I'd be able to make good friends, but there would always be new people to know. And that always excited me. I was the type of person who enjoyed going to a party where I only knew three different people. And I knew that throughout that night, I would make a lot more connections. So I had that basis of the experience. And then I actually studied finance in college at Penn State. And maybe it was the contrast that really stood out to me because I went from a campus where I felt like I knew everyone, I was running into people that I knew constantly, to working in consulting for Deloitte. And I went from this campus all of a sudden to this cubicle staring into an Excel sheet or a PowerPoint deck for 12 hours a day. And it was the lack of connection that I had at that time that really showed me the importance of it. And I guess now on a greater scale, it's kind of like what happened with COVID, with all the companies now that are focusing on connection because it was taken from us and we couldn't do it at that time.
It's kind of like the inverse in a cubicle with Deloitte versus being on a campus with 40,000 people, or being at a party, a house party, a campus party where you only know three people, and you naturally wanting to meet them. That work environment, it was difficult. And in today's context, Rob, in today's modern workforce, right? Hybrid, no more office, all office. What's missing is that interpersonal connection, the water cooler talk, the electricity that happens when you're starting the day or finishing the day, and people connect in those spontaneous, unexpected ways. Apart from being together and collaborating, and there's different texture in person than there is on the screen, today's modern workforce requires more than ever a tactile, face-to-face, rich getting together of people where the electricity happens. And what have you found with people you've been interviewing, how they're adapting, or are they looking for new ways to adapt to that? Or what are you seeing?
Yeah, I think, well, throughout the pandemic, I met a lot of people, and actually still to this day, where I would talk to people because I was meeting them virtually at that point, and they say, "You're the first new person that I've talked to in the last 6 months or in the last year, whatever." And I still have that today. And I think there's this feeling that I was just having a conversation with a girl in California about this week. This feeling that there was a period where we thought, okay, connection was something that we wanted to get back to. And I think we did that initially. And then I think it's kind of slowed down a bit. And she was saying she had to schedule to go out with her daughter's friends' moms, and they had a great time going to the mall together. And she thought, why haven't we been doing more of that? Like, why have we not gotten right back into that as COVID has sort of subsided? And I think part of it is inertia too, right? Like a body at rest stays at rest. So I think there's this space where people want the connection because they didn't have it. And then there's a piece where they're trying to figure out how to get that connection because one, they're feeling comfortable at home, they're working from home, they're not forced to go outside. And two, they don't really know how to approach it. So for me, I think the intentionality is the key. I always tell people, like, set a connection goal for yourself, even if it's one new person a month. And Brian Grazer is a famous Hollywood producer. He wrote a book called A Curious Mind. It's one of my favorite books. And I like it because in it, he talks about how every 2 weeks throughout his career, he's done these curiosity conversations with people outside of the film industry. And he talks about how those conversations, like in Apollo 13, for example, the plot of the movie, everyone knows what happens. The spacecraft comes back safely, but when you're trying to showcase the climax and the intensity of that situation, he leveraged stories that he heard. I believe it was from a woman in Cuba who was being tortured in Cuba. And he took her experience and applied it to how he produced that movie and those scenes. And I think there's so much value to it. So he does every 2 weeks. I do 3 people a day normally. I think if people had a goal for themselves and they built it into their life, much like a gym routine or the goal to read a certain number of books per year, they'd really start to capture that value.
It's so important, the curiosity, the state of wonder, being interested rather than, in today's Instagram world, being worried about being interesting. It's
Mhm.
such an important feature. And I think another thing, if I may give a little editorial here, Rob, in this conversation of connecting, the importance. I too am a people person. When we first spoke and Laura, my cousin, told me about you, I was like, sure, absolutely. I talk to speakers, I talk to meeting planners all day and speakers all day. So sure, let's see what Rob's story is, what his message is, and how he might be able to provide a lasting difference to my clients. Mentors and being a mentee, it's so much richer in person.
Mm,
And that's one of the things through the screen is just harder. It can happen, and there's great relationships that are formed, and an impact is made, and people are provided the direction that they need or the straight talk that they need or require from a mentor as a mentee. But
mhm.
that's what happens in the office, I think, being in person too. So I want to shift gears a little bit. I want you to share with us, when you have this hour, what do you
Mhm.
do with people?
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny, a lot of people call it an interview. I've never referred to what I've done as interview
Did
because
I
I've
call it an interview?
you did call it an interview, but that's
Okay.
okay. I forgive you. The
No, it's like this internal bias. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I don't think a lot of people have another thing that they can relate this idea of just connecting for an hour for no reason to. So the closest thing in their mind is, okay, he's interviewing people and then he's sharing their story. But every single person that I meet, and I often get messages through Instagram. I've been fortunate enough over the last 7 years to have my project spread through word of mouth. I've done things like Ryan Seacrest's radio show. I did the Kelly Clarkson show in 2019, the Today Show in 2020. So people will find me through these different mediums and message me on Instagram, or they'll send me an email. And before COVID, it was like, hey, if you're in the area, I would love to meet with you. But if not, I hope I get to your city or your country someday. And now it doesn't matter where people are located because we can connect through Zoom. So people will message me and I'll just find a time with them. I don't do any research into people before I meet them. The joy of the project for me is kind of unwrapping that gift in the moment, that gift being their story. And in that time we spend together, my goal is, I guess, twofold. One, to just get as accurate of a picture of them as possible. I share their story afterwards, and I want when they look at the story that I write, I want them to say, that reflects who I am. That seems accurate. The second piece is I want to open the door so that the next time I run into that person in my life, whether it's 5 days from then or 5 years from then, I want to pass them as a friend as opposed to a stranger. So the hour is really just getting to know each other. And I share this framework in my talks. It's called FORWARD. It stands for Family, Occupation, Recreation, and Dreams. And I tell people you can get to know anyone in the world by thinking about their life like a timeline and asking questions within each of those categories. Because it doesn't matter where we come from in life, what we've been through, we all have a family dynamic. We all have an occupation path, like education, into some type of job to pay the bills. We all have recreational hobbies outside of work. We all have dreams of where we want to go. And very simply, like, you can dive into those categories with people and easily fill an hour because each new door that you open leads to a whole room of other doors that you can open and go down, and you can go back up a floor. So in my mind, I'm kind of just walking through their life story using that framework as a guide.
Did you create that framework along the way? Start with it from the beginning? How did you create that on your own?
I did not create it. So I wrote an article in 2019, How to Meet 12 New People in 2019, because I wanted to encourage other people to have a goal, to have an excuse to get out and meet new people. And I posted it to Reddit, and someone said, hey, you should post this to the subreddit, Social Skills. So I posted it to there, and then it's created a conversation, and people were commenting on it. And one of the comments said, this reminds me of the Ford framework of conversation. And that was the first time I had ever heard it. And I started looking into it, and it really applied to the way I thought about people's lives because I guess up until that point, I would always say, I just want to understand where people are from, where they are, and where they want to go. And the framework just really helped me with my conversations, which I think is interesting. I spoke to a group of realtors in February, and the planner wanted to make sure that I didn't patronize them. He's like, these are people. They know how to talk to people. So when I shared that framework, I said I had already met over 2,500 people by the time this framework came into my life. And it's something that's added a lot of value since then. So it's something I think that it's all like common sense to each and every one of us, but something that can bring that common sense to the forefront of our mind.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, I think maybe some of us do it naturally. But
Mhm.
then to put a word to it or to put a name to it, and have a little bit of structure, you can have a little bit more command and own it a little bit more, as opposed to kind of doing it on an unconscious level. We ask, what do you do? Or,
Mhm.
what do you do outside of work? But if you're coming in with that FORD, not the vehicle,
Right.
the Ford framework. That's really great. So now here we are. We're over halfway to the 10,000. Do you have a general sense of when you're going to get there?
I think so.
And how important is it that you get there sooner than later?
It is not important at all that I get there sooner rather than later. It's very much the journey, not the destination, which is funny because oftentimes the joke when people hear about my project is, "Oh, come to my event, you'll meet 50 people at one time." I'm like, "Well,
Right.
I just spoke at an event on Tuesday, and the woman afterwards was like, 'Well, let's take our selfie together. Now I'm one more person you met.'" And I said, "No, I need to spend an hour with you so I can actually know who you are." To me, the goal is not to get to 10,000. The goal is to really meet people and forge these relationships. So I was very naive when I started the project. I thought I was going to finish it in about 4 years. I just figured I'll take a 9, 10 hour workday, 9, 10 people a day. Sure, it'd be easy. I didn't think about traveling in between meetings, the time it would take to write about people, the time it would take to set up meetings, the time it would take to go to the bathroom, eat lunch, etc. So I was
Right.
the
People
first.
people cancel, there's weather.
Exactly, yeah. I've probably had about 1,000 people at this point cancel or reschedule last minute, so it's pushed it out a lot. It's been just over 7 years. The first 8 months I was working at a tech startup at the time. The company that I worked for was acquired. I was laid off in July of 2016. I chose to dive into this full time, and I've been doing it full time ever since. At that time, I was meeting 5 people a day because I was just riding my bike around Philadelphia. Then I went out to Los Angeles. I dropped down to 4 people a day because of the traffic out there. And I kind of held
Okay.
that for years until I started speaking. Because when I started speaking, I finally had a repeatable way to financially sustain myself in the project. And I had done partnerships before with brands like WeWork, but speaking to me was the most authentic way to push my project forward because I'm just sharing what I've learned with people that I can bring value to. And then I'm spending the rest of my time learning myself so I can communicate that value. So I dropped down to 3 people a day about 2 years ago so I could spend the afternoons prospecting, having calls with clients and whatnot. And now I think it's gonna take probably 8 more years. So I'm 32 years old now. I think it would be nice if I finished by 40 just because 10,000 by 40 sounds really clean. But I always
Right.
tell people, if I finish when I'm 42 years old, that's totally fine. If I finish when I'm
Right.
38, that's totally fine. But it's interesting because a lot of people think the pace will increase because it's becoming more popular, but it's starting to slow a little bit because I'm starting to speak more. So it's a good
Right.
good issue to have.
Right. I mean, I'm already kind of thinking about the title of the book,
Mm.
1,000 cancellations, or,
Yeah,
10,000. They're not interviews or even conversations. They're
yeah.
10,000 new friends, or something like that. That's really cool. What are some of the most surprising things that you've either run across, not in a gossipy way,
Mhm.
that you've come across, the most unexpected things, and even the most, I don't know if the word is disappointing, but things that have shocked you or really have been unexpected?
Yeah, I think, well, in terms of unexpected and hearing people's stories, the world is a much bigger place than I thought it to be. And I think that holds true for all of us. I oftentimes think of this idea of our sphere of relevance and what we know of the world is really based on what we've experienced in the communities that we're a part of. So as I've talked to people, I've just realized that the spectrum of life paths is so much wider than I could have anticipated. And it's not my fault that I didn't know of them before, right? It wasn't that I was not trying to be exposed to them. I just, how would you know? So yeah, I think as I started speaking to people, there's a girl that I met in the UK on December 30th, and just to talk about one of the extremes of someone's life path, when she was 10 years old, her parents took her to India to go see, like, where they were from and whatnot, and on one of their domestic flights there, the plane crashed. Her dad, her mom, and her brother all died in the plane crash.
Oh,
Someone pulled her from the wreckage. She went into a hospital back in the UK, spent 4 months. She had severe burns all over her body. And she talked about that experience and the day they gave her a mirror to look at herself. And she said she thought it was a prank because she was a prankster at the time. And she just couldn't comprehend that that's what she looked
mm,
like at that point. And she said when she left the hospital is when the bullying started, when people started crossing the street because they thought she might have some disease, when kids would throw things at her to see if she felt any emotion. And that for me is a massive eye-opening of perspective to understand that this is someone's lived path. Like this is someone lost their entire family only to go into years of someone bullying them for the tragic experience that they went through. And to understand the strength that she had to employ to overcome that and the confidence she gained along the way, yeah, it's very eye-opening for me. So for me, growing up in a middle class family, both my parents are still around. I have two older siblings. I'm very grateful for the fact that I still have my family. I grew up in a loving family where I was encouraged to go to school, get your job, find your wife, settle down, have kids, etc. Like whereas before that was the expectation in my life, now it's a luxury that I can really appreciate. And I got that through conversation. So that was a surprising thing for me was really the gratitude that I would gain through the project of holding a mirror up to myself every day through other people's stories and understanding, wow, this thing that I took for granted before, I'm so lucky to have. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's just that the spectrum is so wide.
So
So
powerful.
yeah,
Really, really, really powerful. And I'm sure that's one that's very present for you. I'm sure there's countless stories where you've been delightfully surprised about, one of the phrases in our home that, I've got from my father was, you never know who you're sitting next to. You're on a plane, you're on the subway, you're on a ferry, wherever you are, you're waiting in the doctor's office. Another way of saying it is you don't know what's going on behind closed doors in your neighbor's home to a certain extent, right? Who you're talking to, the breadth and world of experience that
mhm.
they have. And that's what you were saying. It's a big, big world out there. And boy, it is,
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things that I share now is the more that I've interacted with the depth of people through hearing their stories, the more that I acknowledge that it exists. So my brain, in a way, is becoming trained to think of not, oh, that person cut me off, like they're a jerk. And it's not, I'm no longer being trained with those surface level interactions. I'm being trained with, okay, I spent an hour with this person. I've learned what their childhood is like, their adolescence. And that's allowed me to think of most everyone in that way. So when I sit at people in the doctor's office or if someone wrongs me in one way or another, I can put into context this person has a whole lifetime of experiences that are going into how they're behaving in this moment.
That's right. And then, yeah, that's really powerful. And that's all there is this moment, right? That's
Yeah.
brought them there. That's really cool. Let's shift gears again. You're speaking now. You're doing keynote speeches. You mentioned real estate. I know you've spoken to all sorts of other kinds of groups and companies. Tell us a little bit about that. Synthesize your message for us. How has that been? And what have you learned doing that?
Yeah, it's been great. And I have to thank you for being there in the early days. Right after we had talked, I did my first TEDx talk. And that same month, April of 2021, I had my first paid engagement. And I'm really
All right.
fortunate that, yeah, for me, being a speaker and having to leverage your network to succeed in this industry, very lucky that I have a network of 5,500 people to help me along the way. So actually, the way that I got started in speaking was August of 2019. I met a girl through my project. You may know of her. Her name is Michelle Polar. She's
Of
a successful
course.
speaker, and she was telling me about her path with it. And she said, you've had the media, you have a really interesting concept. There's room for you in this industry. So I have her to thank for really turning me on to speaking. And the next summer, I put out calls on Instagram and said, hey, if you can connect me with your school or your company or whatever, I would love to speak there. And people did that. And that's how I got my foot in the door. So my message, I call it the untapped value of human connection or creating empathy through conversation or how to talk to anyone. And I start out my speech by just sharing a story of a girl that I met who had a big impact on my perspective. I talk a little bit about my path of going from Deloitte Consulting to this tech startup into this connecting with people full time. And I share the value that I see in human connection because I think too often people only think about it in terms of networking or dating. And because they do that, they miss so much. And to me,
Right.
I've seen three different levels that I talk about. One being an increased sense of belonging. Naturally, the more people you expose yourself to, the bigger sense of belonging you're going to feel to your community and the world around you. The second level is the expansion of our perspective. And like the woman that I met from the UK, when you talk to people, you expand your perspective, you get different bits of knowledge that you can use in your life. And the third thing is the opening of doors to new opportunities and experiences that you otherwise wouldn't have been able to create for
Right.
yourself. And I've seen that time
Right.
and time again through my project. I share the story of how I ended up flying in a plane that a guy, the pilot, had built himself. So never would have done that if I hadn't done this project. And then after defining the value of connection, I give people that Ford framework so they can use that to get to know people. I give them questions that I ask every day in my meetings that I'm still doing today for family, occupation, recreation, and dreams. And what I do is I'll break them out into one on one pairs to discuss their answers to those questions with each other. So when I go into a meeting or an event, each person in the audience is connecting with four other people in the audience, getting a chance to share their story and learn the stories of the people around them. And I close by talking about reflections, the importance of reflecting on the connections that we've met. I do that through my Instagram posts. People can do it through following people on LinkedIn or whatever. And not only has it allowed me to lock in the value of what I've learned, but that has created ripple effects where now there are people in India, Boston, Toronto, Germany, Ethiopia who have taken my project and said, I'm going to go and meet 100 people. I'm going to try to meet 1,000 people. And the interesting thing is, I didn't say, hey, go out and do this. I think we should
Right.
do this.
Right.
They saw the value in it. And when you think about inclusion and belonging being really important in the workplace now, how do you create those ripple effects in the workplace? It's by being a positive example of connection for the people around you. So I just try to communicate that with people that if you start to value the stories of your colleagues and the people around you, you can have that impact on your colleagues. And that's kind of the flow of my speech with people.
And just in a nutshell, I know because we've spoken about it and some of our colleagues in the speaking industry, the feedback has been great. And meeting planners, meeting professionals are really, really pleased with bringing you in and bringing your message. It connects with people on so many levels. I love the untapped value of human connection, right?
Mm,
Untapped human connection. It's just, you can't overstate the importance of it, right?
mhm.
In today's modern world, when everything's transactional, when everything's a swipe left, swipe up, swipe down, the value of untapped human connection cannot be overstated. In today's post pandemic world where there's working from home, hybrid working, hybrid events, hybrid conferences, the hunger, the appetite, and the thirst, and really the need for being connected as human beings is stronger than ever. And then when it happens, the spark and the electricity and the richness of it become more and more apparent. So when you find yourself in a situation, whether it's a conference, a meeting, a program that you're attending, you see a keynote speaker that you're brought in to open up your mind, make sure that you go out and you introduce yourself to people that you might not have known. Show interest, show curiosity, display a sense of wonder. Because in today's world where everything is a transaction, everything's a commodity, everything is an app, you're swiping left, you're swiping right, you're scrolling up and down. Stop. Take a look at that value of the human connection. Take it as far as you can, because that is the traction that's going to forward what's important to you, what your aspirations are, and what you want to do, whether it's in your personal and your business life. This is the thing that is going to make the difference today for your future. So, you're getting great feedback. What's on the horizon? Tell me a little bit about the upcoming speeches, what you're excited about, what you're working on that excites you.
Yeah, I mean, I have a bunch. I think in the first couple of months, I had like 8 different organizations reach out to me about speaking, which is great. Fortune 500 companies, different associations. And I'm in a place right now, and then other conventions for like high school students and whatnot. So it spans the board, and I'm in a place right now where all those conversations are being had, and if they land, it'll be a great year. And I believe in my ability to go do a speech and have people have a good time and talk about it. So I just spoke at an association on Tuesday, AHAM, the American Association for Healthcare Administrative Management. My cousin was on the board. They brought me in. I spoke. I got great feedback. Now they're passing me to multiple other chapters. They're having a conversation about potentially bringing me in for the national convention. So I'm really just taking the steps that are required of speakers to become successful, and also doing my project full time on the side, still meeting 3 people a day. And if I mentioned earlier the importance of my network, if I look at, because I've been keeping track of every single speech that I've done and how it was sourced, the number one sourcing of my speeches is the people that I've met through my project. So I might be out in Wisconsin for a SHRM event in August, and then all these other ones that are up in the air for the time in between. So yeah, everything is looking good. And I believe as a speaker who is 2 years into the game, I think in the beginning, you can see what you can do, but you don't know exactly how to get there.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I'm focused on doing a really good job, having an impact on people, and at the same time being patient, not trying to force these things, but understand that it takes time to forge these
Yeah.
relationships and get to the stages that you want to get to.
Yeah. You may recall, and you may not, I use the term slow burn. It's a slow burn. They say
Mm.
overnight success. Yeah. Sometimes that night is 5 years, 10 years, and then, it just happens. You're on the right path. I think one thing, that I just want to underline for you, underscore, emphasize is something you said. And, I know it, but I just want to say it back to you. You're continuing with the project, which of course you are. But the fact that you're doing your work that got you to where you are and you're continuing and you're getting better at it and the conversations are richer and you're better now than you were, 1,000 conversations ago. The fact that you're doing that keeps the message vivid, keeps it present, and it's adapting along the way. So, I can only give you words of encouragement. I know you're going to be delivering to my clients and they're going to be over the moon about you. So it's really exciting for what's in the cards for us going forward. Rob, I want to take this moment to move into a part of our conversation called 20 questions. We're trying to come up with a new name for it, but right now the working name is 20 questions. So these are questions that I'm just going to kind of rapid fire at you. Give us your best kind of word association and we'll take it from there. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. What is the most interesting thing about you that we wouldn't learn from your resume?
I can do a standing back tuck, like a backflip just from standing.
Wow. Just standing still and let it rip.
Yep, I learned from a cheerleader at Penn State when I was a college student.
Wow. And you can still do it?
Yeah, I if I tried here, I'd probably kill myself. But yeah, someday I'll show you in person.
I'll hold you to that. Don't
Okay.
ask me to do it, okay?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't want to be cut in half. What's one of your favorite books?
Shoe Dog by Phil Knight.
Very cool book. What's the greatest risk you've ever taken?
Leaving Deloitte Consulting in a paid-for MBA to try to create a career out of meeting 10,000 people.
What are 3 things that bring a smile to your face?
Family, spending quality time with family. This is very specific, but the first spoonful of rice when you cook it, just to make sure if it's done, it always
Yeah.
tastes so good to me. And daylight, which I'm really
Wow.
appreciative of now.
What is a skill you don't have but you wish you did?
Hip hop dancing.
Cool. What are you most grateful for in life?
The people that are closest to me.
What's the next country on your bucket list?
Mm, Colombia.
Ah, if you could go back in time to any point in history or visit the future, which would you pick and why?
I think the past would be interesting. I'd like to go far, far into the future, like a day where humans have settled on multiple different planets to understand. I think that we oftentimes think we're at the height of however technologically advanced we'll ever be, but I think there will come a day where someday they say that people used to just live on Earth. How crazy is that? And I'd like to see that
Right,
day.
right. What's the most beautiful thing in the world you can think of?
Making people feel seen and heard.
Hmm, I got it. Well, that's a great point of departure for us. I just can't thank you enough for being with us today. Rob, your generosity, your authenticity, your heart, sharing with us your path. I don't think I followed the whole Ford structure, but I might have hit some of the points of it. Just thanks for being with us. I look forward to working together in the future and wish you really only the best.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for having me on. I think us doing this podcast is a testament of the power of connection, of me just meeting your cousin, it leading to a phone call that you were kind enough to take, and here we are 2 years later. So I think this is just the beginning of something beautiful. I'm excited to keep the relationship going.
Yeah, well said. As I'll leave on this. I do fill in the blanks. I do Mad Libs with my daughters every morning. Life is, and they fill in the blank with an adventure. And this is testament to that. It sure is an adventure. Thanks for being on the adventure with us, Rob. If you'd like to learn more about this speaker, visit our website at thekeynotecurators.com. There you'll find dozens of videos of speakers that are a perfect fit for your event. If you'd like to reach out directly, please click on the link below in the description. My name is Seth Dechtman, and you've been watching Curated Insights.